We have a patch for the Overwatch 2 beta, and it is a pretty large one. We've got Quick Play now has open queue, so that's another way to go about that if you don't like the wait times that you're looking at there. They did reduce the base on third person weapon, so hopefully that'll deal with some of the it feeling tiresome to play from an audio perspective and struggling a little bit to hear it. The weapons, yes, did sound impactful and cool, but there were some complaints of people feeling overwhelmed by the weapon sound. So that makes sense, similar with this reverb system. They've got a lot of bug fix stuff. Some of this is going to be UI type stuff showing up wrong in the kill feed when you get off environmental eliminations, things like that. Health pack spawn timers not showing. I'm happy to see those back. Couple things like that. The wrecking ball bug where it was crashing other players is gone, so he's going to be selectable now, I expect, and that's a good one to have fixed. Some issues with Doomfist where power block, melee attacks wouldn't hurt him. Not a huge deal. Roadhog's hook cooldown, we did a video on that, so that it looks like was a bug. They've changed it to how it is on live. Makes sense. And then just a couple other bug fix type things. Not a huge deal. Fixing some geometry. Seems like they're always doing that. There seems to be more geometry even that you can abuse now that they removed years ago in Overwatch 1. That's kind of surprising to see. Maybe they're going to fix that too, but for now we're only seeing it on the new maps. And then we get into the hero bounce. So here's something interesting. They've changed the projectile width from 0.5 meters to 0.1 meters. So they've doubled the size of her railgun shot. So okay, that's solid. We did hear that the pros were dominating with this when it was this size in the past, but they're seeing in their study that players at varying skill levels are struggling to land shots with their alt fire. So they felt the need to do it. And they also felt the need to reduce her power slide from 7 to 6 seconds. Now, again, when she was at her most powerful in the alpha, I believe it was at 4 or 5 seconds, so this isn't that short comparatively, but these two things should help her out, and she wasn't seeing a ton of play for a new hero. She was seeing some play because she was new, but she wasn't feeling incredibly powerful to people, and you don't want her to be overshine the entire cast, but this probably does make sense to give her some level of buff. They're at least, seeking the middle here. Too powerful before, buff back up. Good to see it. I don't think this is wild. Soldier probably needs some nerfs in the one tank world, and he's going to get them. His damage is going from 20 to 18, which is big. His movement speed with sprint is being reduced by 10%, so I suppose at this point we're looking at a sprint similar to his Overwatch 1 sprint speed, because obviously the passive plus sprint was a bit much for him. That makes sense. That's a lot of repositioning potential he had. This probably brings him a little bit more in line, but they've done more. They decided to tinker with his ult. So now Tac Visor allows for critical hits if the shot would have been a critical hit without Tac Visor going. So it'll auto hit body shots unless the shot would have hit their head, which is pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I think it's going to be a bad time for a couple specific heroes, tanks really, like D.Va, but that you can still try to aim meaningfully during Tac Visor, and it's not just, oh, I'm losing damage during Tac Visor, is nice to see. That said, they did pay for it, the ability to get critical hits, by losing the removing of fall-off damage that the Tac Visor had. So, okay, overall, definitely some meaningful nerfs that we're looking at Soldier. May knock him out of S tier, but honestly, he's still probably pretty solid in the setup that is Overwatch 2. Sombra, looks like they're again playing with the movement speed thing. They decided the passive on top of her stealth movement speed was too much, so they've reduced the movement speed boost from stealth from 65 to 50. Makes sense to me. Roadhog, again, they're tinkering with ultimate abilities. So it's no longer going to be the channeled ability in Whole Hog. It's going to be more like a Tac Visor type ability or a transform ultimate. So you have to hold down left click to continue to end out that Whole Hog shots, but that means you can't be stunned out of it. It also means that you can't have it. You can use normal abilities. So you can throw out your hook during it if you want. You can take a breather during it. That gives it a fair bit more flexibility. I still think it's going to be one of the weaker ults in the game, but that does help it quite a bit, not losing it to cancels and being able to interrupt and protect yourself with getting a hook out right now is more important to cancel your thing. Protecting myself with breather is more important, even though it's going to take a large portion of the ult's duration. That does look interesting. Winston, this he needed. Secondary fire ammo cost reduced from 20 to 12. He might not have needed it from a power perspective. Winston was probably doing okay, but it felt bad to have 20 ammo, especially if someone then misses the hit scan shot, and then they're down 20 ammo, and then they're really, really struggling with the actual Tesla work. It was also basically anytime you do an alt fire, you have to reload sort of thing. That's still probably mostly true, but it's nice to see this. I'd have liked it to cost even less still, but hey, that might have been too much of a buff. Little Winston bias here. And then Wrecking Ball's been reverted. So the original Overwatch 1 knockback values for hitting people, they're back. That makes sense. Wrecking Ball was mostly underperforming as a tank. That has a bit to do with uptime of him, where he really can't afford to be out of the fight in a one-tank world. Not doing something the way that you saw in Overwatch 1 was fine, is less fine in Overwatch 2, at least for the moment. So that makes sense. Cool. Good to see a buff to him. Zarya gets a nerf on the other hand. Duration, we're touching a lot of ults. Duration reduced from 4 to 3.5 seconds on grab. I kind of feel like this is them, they're going, oh, grab is more powerful because there's less things that can block it. There's not always a diva. There's not always Sigma hands, all those sort of things. But I kind of look at this and go, why did you guys make it so that Fade and Wraith and those sorts of things didn't take people out of grab anymore? Like, I'm okay with it not taking people out of grab, but this almost feels like, oh, that made grab too powerful, so now we're nerfing grab sort of thing. When it's like, okay, you just change things for the sake of changing things. But maybe they had a purpose. Whatever. This one is probably necessary, but I don't like it. Crossfade's self-healing penalty increased from 30% to 60%, and this is because obviously a Lucio who is healing himself in heal aura and has a healing passive going, obviously he can mix in speed for a second to get away, for a second to let the passive activate, but then he is healing a lot, and it just can feel to a lot of players pointless to shoot at him if they don't just know that they can 2 or 3 tap him. So I get it. I get why they're doing this. I think it's sort of necessary to bring down his survivability a little bit at some of the more average and lower levels where people aren't reliably connecting with those shots one after another, because 3 out of 4 shots isn't good enough. You have to hit 3 out of 3. But the problem that I run into is I just don't like, from a design perspective, this like, oh, your ability heals other people this much, but it heals you this much. I've never really been a fan of that from a design perspective. It just feels counterintuitive. But if that's the best solution they could find, that's the best solution they could find. Probably needed to do something like this to make the game feel good for the majority of players. Bap, this just misses the mark. They know Bap's underperforming, so they're saying, hey, let's give him more ammo for his alt fire, his healing shots, up from 10 to 13, but that just doesn't fix his fundamental problem. He'll be stronger because that's just a numbers buff, and numbers buffs do help. Hey, less need to reload, but like, his problem really is that he can't sit in the pocket and just cleanly alternate between left and right clicks, and he's gonna struggle a little to overcome that. Yes, he can make his own opportunities to, hey, do damage with left click and then move out to right. I'd have honestly preferred to see a reversion to his damage fall off range, but hey, this is what they did. It doesn't fix his core problem, which is that alternating between shots isn't as powerful in this one tank world. There's not just an enemy tank and a friendly tank always sitting right next to each other. It's gonna hurt him a little bit. So be it. Anna's another one they gave buffs and nerfs to, so they've increased her ammo by 3, so she's got 15 shots in her biotic rifle. We've gone all over the map with that. We've had 12, we've had 10, we've had 14, now we're up to 15. Sure, whatever. And then the duration of her biotic nade decreased by a second. I definitely call this a net nerf. I think this is a bigger deal that we're losing a second off of biotic nade, but that's okay. She did get something to compensate. She was in a pretty good spot. It might not be the most fun thing in the world for support players. In fact, we're looking at support players and we're seeing nerf to a good support, nerf to a good support, nerf to a good support, buff to a support that was struggling a little bit, but probably isn't going to make him wildly more fun. This doesn't seem like the more fun support patch, but hopefully we'll get that in the future. Zenyatta, base shields increased from 150 to 175. So we're looking at that, and we're looking at the 225 health Zen, which works for me. And he's also got snap kick. So I guess Zen monk is a Shaolin monk here. He's got his super kick going on. Increased quick melee damage by 50% and significantly increased its knockback. We're gonna have to see what that looks like, but the hi-ya kick that sends people flying and does 45 damage to them, that'll be fun. That'll really help some people finish off targets that are close to them, that were out of melee range for finishing them off, so you couldn't justify a melee, but it was, hard to hit that final shot on that small target in your face. It'll be interesting. That should help him a little bit. And then Brig got the knockback doubled on Shield Bash. So it's difficult to tell when Brigitte lands a Shield Bash because the impact of the ability was not easily noticeable. This is a subtle change that will make the ability feel more satisfying. We'll have to see exactly what that means. But overall, they think it's a buff, it seems like. I think. We'll look at that. This doesn't look amazing in terms of from a support perspective. If you were looking for yes, this will make supports more fun, this isn't that patch. It did move them around some. I think where it placed some of these buffs and nerfs makes sense. I then think if we get into some of these buffs, very good, solid, but then, these are fine too. The nerfs that we see to this movement. Sojourn may be powerful now. I don't think she's going to be over the top though. Overall, pretty solid balance patch, pretty solid. Definitely not perfect, but if they're going to keep iterating on this, I don't know that we'll get one every week, but if they're going to keep iterating on this, this looks like good things mostly to play with. They're adjusting heroes that need adjustment. They're adjusting them sometimes in ways that make sense, sometimes in ways that don't really address their problems, but it works for me. But what do you guys think? Do you look at this patch and go, yeah, that's great? Or are you a Soldier main going, no, they're killing my character? Let me know what you think of this patch, or if they needed to do more interesting stuff for supports in the comments down below. If you're enjoying the content, drop a like, consider subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one for more Overwatch 2 coverage. Thanks, Temporal out.